Jennifer Joyce Kesse was born on May 20th, 1981 in Tampa, Florida. She was the daughter of Joyce and Drew Kesse, and she had a younger brother named Logan. From the very beginning, Jennifer was described as ambitious, smart, and incredibly close to her family. She wasn't just book smart, she was street smart too. Jennifer was what you'd call safety conscious to the extreme. She always locked her doors and windows, carried pepper spray, and would call someone if she was walking alone in a parking lot after dark. This wasn't paranoia. This was a young woman who understood that being careful was just part of being independent. After graduating from the University of Central Florida in 2003 with a degree in finance, Jennifer landed her dream job as a finance manager at Westgate Resorts. She was climbing the corporate ladder fast, having just received a promotion. And in late 2005, she did something that made her incredibly proud. She bought her very first condo with her own money. The Mosaic at Millennia Complex in Orlando wasn't just any apartment complex. It was a gated community with security guards. Jennifer's parents felt good about their daughter living there because it seemed safe. It had everything you'd want: controlled access, security presence, and a professional atmosphere. Jennifer was also in love. She'd been dating Rob Allen for about a year. Rob lived in Fort Lauderdale, about 3 hours south of Orlando, so they were making the long-distance thing work by spending practically every weekend together. In January 2006, they had just returned from what Rob described as an amazing vacation to St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. Jennifer was glowing when she talked to her family about the trip. Everything in her life was falling into place perfectly. But here's what makes this case so chilling. Jennifer did everything right. She lived in a secure building. She was careful about her surroundings. She stayed in touch with family constantly, and she followed routines that people knew about. All the things that were supposed to keep her safe. Let's walk through Jennifer's final days, because the details matter here. On Sunday, January 22nd, Jennifer and Rob returned from their St. Croix vacation. She spent the night at his place in Fort Lauderdale. Monday morning, January 23rd, she drove straight from Rob's house to work in Orlando. That Monday was like any other workday. Jennifer called her mother on her way into the office, bubbling with excitement about the trip. She told her mom every detail: how beautiful the islands were, how much fun she and Rob had together. Joyce Kesse later said her daughter sounded happier than she'd heard her in months. Jennifer worked a full day at Westgate Resorts. At 6 p.m., she left the office and called her dad on the drive home. It was a quick conversation, just the usual check-in they did regularly. Drew Kesse would later say it was completely normal, just Jennifer saying hi and that she'd call later. But that evening, things took a turn. Around 10 p.m., Jennifer called Rob. What should have been a sweet conversation between two people still glowing from their romantic getaway turned into an argument. The long-distance relationship was taking its toll. Jennifer was feeling insecure, questioning whether Rob really loved her when they were apart so much. Rob later described Jennifer as a little emotional, saying things like, "You don't love me, I'm not with you." They talked it through, but the conversation ended on an uncomfortable note. Still, they were together when they hung up. It wasn't a breakup, just one of those relationship bumps that happen. Rob had no idea those would be the last words he'd ever hear Jennifer speak. Here's what makes this even more tragic. Jennifer was a creature of habit. Every single morning on her way to work, she would call Rob. It was their routine. So when Tuesday morning came and his phone didn't ring, Rob started to worry. He tried calling her around the time she usually called him. The phone went straight to voicemail. Now, maybe Rob thought their argument the night before was worse than he realized. Maybe he thought Jennifer was giving him the silent treatment. But as the morning wore on and she still didn't answer, that worry started turning into something more serious. Tuesday, January 24th, 2006. This is the day that everything changed. Jennifer didn't show up for work. Now, for most people, missing work might not immediately trigger alarms. But this was Jennifer Kesse we're talking about. The same woman who would call her family if she was walking through a dark parking lot. The same woman who had never missed work without calling. Her boss at Westgate Resorts knew something was wrong immediately. This was completely out of character. So he did what anyone would do. He called Jennifer's parents. Drew Kesse answered the phone around 10:30 that Tuesday morning. Is Jennifer okay? She didn't show up for work today. Drew's stomach dropped. He immediately tried calling his daughter. No answer. Just like Rob's call earlier that morning, it went straight to voicemail. Joyce and Drew Kesse didn't waste time. They got in their car and started the 2-hour drive from Tampa to Orlando. Can you imagine that drive? 2 hours of your mind racing, coming up with scenarios, hoping for the best, but fearing the worst. While they were driving, they called the manager at Jennifer's condo complex and asked him to use the spare key to check her apartment. The manager agreed and went up to Unit 206. When he opened the door, everything looked normal. The condo was neat and tidy, but Jennifer wasn't there, and her car wasn't in her assigned parking spot. When Joyce and Drew finally arrived at their daughter's condo that afternoon, they found exactly what the manager had described. The apartment told a story, but not the one they wanted to hear. Jennifer's travel bag was sitting right inside the door, exactly where someone would drop it after returning from a trip. The rest of the condo was spotless, except for Jennifer's bathroom. There was a wet towel, clothes laid out for work, makeup and a curling iron scattered on the vanity. Jennifer had clearly gotten up that morning, taken a shower, and started getting ready for work. But here's what was missing: Jennifer's purse, her keys, and her cell phone. The things she would have grabbed on her way out the door. Drew and Joyce called the police immediately. But here's where the first frustrations began. The Orlando Police Department initially didn't take the disappearance seriously. They suggested that maybe Jennifer had another fight with her boyfriend and would come back. They didn't understand that this family knew their daughter. Jennifer would never just disappear without telling someone. But as the hours passed and there was still no sign of Jennifer, police finally declared her officially missing. What happened next was incredible. The Orlando community rallied around the Kesse family in a way that investigators had never seen before. Jennifer's face was everywhere, on billboards, on flyers, on the news. Her sorority sisters organized search parties. Hundreds of volunteers came out to help. They searched on foot, on horseback, in boats, and with helicopters. Police canvassed the entire area around her complex. Joyce and Drew Kesse set up headquarters right in Jennifer's condo. They were working the phones, coordinating with media, and desperately trying to get their daughter's story out there. The community response was massive. Everyone in Orlando knew Jennifer Kesse's name and face. But despite all these efforts, despite all these people looking, despite all this media attention, nothing. No leads, no sightings, no trace of Jennifer anywhere. Then, 2 days after Jennifer vanished, came the phone call that changed everything. Thursday, January 26th, around 8:10 in the morning. A woman living at the Huntington on the Green condominiums was getting ready for work when she saw a news report about Jennifer's disappearance. They were showing Jennifer's black 2004 Chevrolet Malibu on the screen. The woman looked out her window and froze. That car, or one that looked exactly like it, was parked in her complex's parking lot. She called police immediately. "I think I see the missing girl's car." Huntington on the Green was only about a mile away from Jennifer's condo, But it wasn't an area Jennifer ever went to. In fact, Detective Joel Wright later noted that it was a complex known for stolen car recoveries. When police arrived and confirmed it was Jennifer's car, they felt that initial surge of hope. Maybe they'd find Jennifer nearby. Maybe this was just a carjacking gone wrong and she was hurt but alive somewhere close. But when they processed the car, that hope started fading fast. There were no signs of a struggle inside the vehicle. Jennifer's sandals were still there, along with her cell phone charger. Nothing appeared to be stolen. Her DVD player and other valuables were untouched, but her phone, keys, purse, and briefcase were gone. Even more mysterious, the car appeared to have been wiped down. Despite processing the entire vehicle, investigators found only one fingerprint and one tiny DNA sample. For a car that should have been covered in Jennifer's prints, this was extremely suspicious. But the biggest break, or what they thought was going to be their biggest break, came when they checked the security cameras. The Huntington on the Green complex had security cameras covering the parking area where Jennifer's car was found. Finally, investigators thought they were going to see who took Jennifer. What they found instead was more questions. The footage showed a person parking Jennifer's car around noon on January 24th, the same day she disappeared. You can see the figure get out of the car, walk around to the passenger side, then walk away toward the direction of Jennifer's complex. But here's where this case takes a turn into the truly bizarre. The security cameras at this complex were programmed to take a photo every 2 to 3 seconds, not continuous video. And as this person walked past the camera, their face was perfectly blocked by the fence posts at every single frame. Think about the odds of that happening. Every 2 to 3 seconds, a new photo. And at every single moment, the person's face would have been visible. There's a fence post blocking it. It's like whoever this was knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid them. The FBI was called in to analyze the footage. Using camera angles and having people of different heights walk through the same area, they determined the figure was between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 5 inches tall. The person appeared to be wearing what looked like a painter's uniform or work clothes. NASA even tried to enhance the video using their advanced technology. Nothing. The image couldn't be improved. The Kesse family later referred to this person as the Phantom. And honestly, that name fits perfectly, because this figure seemed to know exactly how to disappear without leaving any real clues. But there was one more piece of evidence. Police brought in a bloodhound named Bo to track any scent from Jennifer's abandoned car. The dog immediately picked up a trail and led officers out of the Huntington complex, down Americana Boulevard, and all the way back to Jennifer's condo complex. The trail ended right at a retention pond near Jennifer's building. The dog was essentially telling them that whoever drove Jennifer's car had walked back to her complex afterward. As you can imagine, investigators immediately started looking at the people closest to Jennifer. That's standard procedure, and unfortunately, it's usually the right place to start. They questioned her ex-boyfriend, who had recently told Jennifer he wanted to get back together. He was quickly ruled out with a solid alibi. Rob Allen, her current boyfriend, was also heavily scrutinized. Some people found it suspicious that he and Jennifer had argued the night before she disappeared, but Rob cooperated fully with the investigation. He even agreed to meet police at Jennifer's car when it was found, so they could watch his reaction when they opened the trunk. Rob was cleared when his alibi checked out completely. They looked into her co-workers at Westgate Resorts. When they examined Jennifer's work computer, they discovered that a manager had been interested in dating her. But Jennifer had refused because she didn't want to mix work with her personal life. This manager was interviewed multiple times but eventually ruled out as well. But then investigators started focusing on something that would become central to this case: the construction workers. Here's where this story gets really unsettling. At the time of Jennifer's disappearance, the Mosaic at Millenia complex was undergoing major renovations. They were converting the apartments into condominiums, which meant construction workers were everywhere. But it wasn't just that they were working there during the day. According to multiple residents, some of these workers were actually living in the empty units while they worked on the complex. Jennifer had mentioned to her family and friends on several occasions that these construction workers made her uncomfortable. She told them that the workers would stop what they were doing and stare when she walked by, or when she was getting into her car. Some would make comments. It was the kind of behavior that made a safety-conscious person like Jennifer feel uneasy. Now, here's where the investigation hit some serious roadblocks. When police tried to question these workers, they claimed there was a language barrier that prevented proper communication. This seems hard to believe in a place like Orlando, where many people are bilingual, but that's what investigators reported. Even more concerning, many of the workers simply disappeared before police could talk to them at all. Some were day laborers who may not have been in the country legally, so when police started asking questions, they scattered. But then came a tip that would give investigators their first real lead. In 2009, 3 years after Jennifer's disappearance, Detective Joel Wright decided to take a fresh look at the case. He interviewed a former housekeeper at Jennifer's complex who hadn't been questioned back in 2006. When Wright showed her the security camera photo of the unidentified person who parked Jennifer's car, the housekeeper's response was immediate. "That looks like Chino." Chino was a name Wright had never heard before, but he quickly learned some disturbing facts. Chino was a former maintenance worker at Jennifer's complex. Not only that, but he had done work inside Jennifer's actual condo just 1 week before she disappeared. When Wright put the name Chino into the police database, he found something shocking. An anonymous tip had been called in during the first week of the investigation, suggesting that Chino might be involved in Jennifer's disappearance. But it was unclear if anyone had ever followed up on this tip. Wright tracked down Chino and found him in a Florida prison, serving time for a serious crime against a teenage girl. A crime he had committed 2 years after Jennifer disappeared. Wright interviewed Chino in prison. Chino denied any involvement in Jennifer's disappearance and agreed to take a polygraph test. He passed. Now, Detective Wright was careful to point out that passing a polygraph doesn't clear someone completely. Polygraphs aren't foolproof, and some people can beat them. But combined with other factors, it was enough for police to move on from Chino as their primary suspect. Still, questions remained. Why had that initial tip about Chino not been properly investigated? How many other workers had police never even identified, let alone questioned? As the years went by, the case grew cold, and the Kesse family's frustration with the Orlando Police Department grew. In 2010, Detective Wright was moved off the case. The family felt like their daughter was being forgotten. They repeatedly asked for the case to be transferred to a cold case unit, believing that specialized investigators might have better resources and fresh perspectives. Orlando PD kept refusing, insisting the case was still active. But what did active really mean? From the family's perspective, nobody was really working the case anymore. In 2016, 10 years after Jennifer vanished, the state of Florida declared her legally dead. Drew Kesse had to stand alone in a courtroom while a judge made this official declaration. He described it as one of the hardest things he'd ever had to do. Fed up with what they saw as inaction, the Kesse family made an unprecedented decision. They sued the Orlando Police Department to get Jennifer's case files. This had never been done before, a family suing to get the files of their loved one's active investigation. It took 3 years of legal battles and cost the family enormous amounts of money. But in 2018, they finally got what they wanted. When the Orlando Police Department handed over Jennifer's files, the Kesse family was shocked by what they found, or rather, what they didn't find. The files were a mess. More than 16,000 pages of documents and 67 hours of video and audio recordings. But they were completely disorganized. Even worse, there appeared to be no significant activity documented for the last 10 years of the active investigation. The family hired private investigator Michael Toretta to go through everything. What he found was disturbing. According to Toretta, there was never one lead detective managing the case from start to finish. Different investigators had worked on it at different times, but there was no continuity, no comprehensive strategy. Worse, there were people who should have been interviewed who never were. There were leads that should have been followed that weren't. The most critical hours after Jennifer's disappearance, when the trail was freshest, had been mishandled. Based on his review of the files and new interviews with residents, Toretta developed a theory about what happened to Jennifer. He believes that up to 10 construction workers were living in an empty apartment directly across the hallway from Jennifer's unit. These workers would have been able to observe her daily routine, when she left for work, when she came home, what her habits were. Toretta's theory is chilling in its simplicity. On the morning of January 24th, Jennifer got up, showered, and got ready for work just like always. She grabbed her purse and keys, walked out her front door, and locked it behind her. But as she turned toward the elevator, someone was waiting. Maybe multiple someones. She was grabbed immediately before she could scream or fight back and dragged into that empty apartment across the hall. According to this theory, Jennifer never made it to her car that morning. Someone else drove her car out of the complex. That's what the witnesses saw when they reported a car swerving erratically around 7:40 a.m. But here's the most frustrating part of Toretta's investigation. When he tried to find those workers who he believes were living in the vacant apartment, he hit a wall. There were no lease records, no list of names, no documentation of who was staying in which unit. How is that possible in a gated community with security? How can you have 10 people living in an apartment with no record of who they are? Over the years, investigators have pursued various other theories and leads. In 2019, they received a tip that someone had been seen throwing a rolled-up carpet into a lake near Jennifer's complex about 10 months after she disappeared. What made this tip particularly interesting was that the workers living across from Jennifer had been laying carpet the day she vanished. Dive teams searched the lake extensively, but found nothing. There's also been speculation about human trafficking, though experts consider this unlikely. Jennifer doesn't fit the typical profile of trafficking victims, and the circumstances of her disappearance don't match usual trafficking patterns. Some have wondered about a serial killer passing through the area, but there were no similar cases around that time that would support this theory. The truth is, without more evidence, investigators can only theorize, and that's exactly what makes this case so maddening. In 2022, Jennifer's case was handed over to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Cold Case Unit. They promised to re-interview key people and, most importantly, to retest evidence using modern technology. This is huge because DNA analysis has advanced dramatically since 2006. That tiny DNA sample found in Jennifer's car that was deemed inconclusive back then might yield results today. When the Kesse family finally got their hands on the case files, they discovered something shocking. There were actually 100 unidentified fingerprints in Jennifer's car, not the 3 they'd been told about. There were also 2 unidentified hairs. How had all this evidence gone untested for so long? The family also discovered photographs they'd never seen before, including images that they believe show signs of a struggle on the hood of Jennifer's car. These photos had been sitting in the files for years. Today, Jennifer Kesse would be 43 years old. Her case is still officially open, but the Orlando Police Department is no longer actively investigating it. By legal agreement, when they turned over the files to the family, they also turned over responsibility for the investigation. The Kesse family now has their own team of more than a dozen former law enforcement officers working the case. They're going through those 16,000 pages of documents, looking for something that dozens of previous investigators might have missed. Drew and Joyce Kesse have spent everything they have, financially and emotionally, trying to find their daughter. They've mortgaged their house, spent their retirement savings, and dedicated their lives to this search. But they're not giving up. Drew Kesse still believes he's going to find Jennifer. Maybe not alive. He's realistic about that after all these years. But he believes he'll get answers. The family has said repeatedly that they don't care about prosecution. They just want to know what happened to their daughter. They want to bring her home. So what really happened to Jennifer Kesse? After reviewing all the evidence, several theories emerge. The most likely scenario, based on the evidence, is that Jennifer was abducted by someone who knew her routine. The person or persons responsible were familiar with the complex, knew when she left for work, and had been watching her. The fact that her car was wiped down and the way the phantom figure in the security video managed to avoid identification suggests this wasn't a random crime of opportunity. This was planned. The construction worker angle remains the most compelling. These workers had access to the complex, some were living there temporarily, and Jennifer had complained about feeling uncomfortable around them. The timing of many workers disappearing before they could be questioned is suspicious. But here's what's most frustrating about this case. Jennifer did everything right. She lived in a gated community. She was safety conscious, she stayed in touch with family constantly. All the precautions that should have protected her didn't. The Kesse family's message has remained consistent for almost 20 years. They just want answers. They've offered rewards, they've pleaded with the public, they've never stopped fighting for Jennifer. Joyce Kesse has said that not knowing what happened to her daughter is worse than knowing she's gone. Drew Kesse has publicly stated that if whoever took Jennifer would just tell them where she is, he doesn't care what happens to that person legally. He just wants his daughter back. The family continues to maintain a Facebook page and a tip line. They believe that someone out there knows something. In a case this complex, with this many workers and this many potential witnesses, somebody saw something. The Jennifer Kesse case represents every parent's worst nightmare. A responsible, careful young woman who did everything right, living in what should have been a safe environment, simply vanished without a trace. But it also represents something else. The power of a family's love and their refusal to give up. Joyce and Drew Kesse have spent nearly 2 decades fighting for their daughter, never accepting that some cases just go unsolved. Today, Jennifer's case remains open with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Advanced DNA testing may yet provide answers that weren't possible in 2006. The Kesse family's private investigation team continues to pursue leads, and somewhere out there, someone knows what happened on the morning of January 24, 2006. Someone knows why Jennifer Kesse never made it to work that day. Someone knows where she is. If you have any information about Jennifer Kesse's disappearance, please contact the Find Jennifer Kesse Facebook page or call the family's tip line. Even the smallest detail could be the key to finally solving this mystery. The Kesse family has endured almost 20 years of not knowing. They deserve answers. Jennifer deserves justice. And until that happens, Her story will continue to be told because some people should never be forgotten. Thanks for watching Deep Crime. If this case affected you the way it affected me, please share this video to help keep Jennifer's story alive. And remember, someone out there knows something. Maybe this video will reach them. Until next time, stay safe out there.